Hey everybody! In this video we're going to talk about how to connect a monitor ST to a monitor SR. Adding a monitor SR to your system allows you to expand to 5.1 while still maintaining all of the same features and functions of a monitor ST. Additionally, if you wanted to do 7.1 or 10.2 or any of those larger surround sound systems, all you would have to do is add additional SR units. It would require a little bit of customization on our end, but it's easily doable. So when you get the SR, you're going to have a few things in the box that come with it. The first is the power supply with the power cable. The second is a shielded Cat5 jumper. And the third is two ribbon cables. These are going to be used to connect the ST and the SR together. So start by taking the shorter of the two ribbon cables and plugging one end into the ST output. And plug the other end into where it says from monitor ST output. That makes sense. Then take the longer of the two ribbon cables and plug one end into where it says to monitor ST input, and plug the other end into the ST input. The ribbon cables make it so that the ST and the SR are plugged into each other, so all of your inputs and outputs are now going to be plugged into the SR. Then, take your Cat5 jumper and plug one end into the SR remote through, and the other end into the ST remote input. Then, if you take the cable that came with your ST remote, and you plug it into the remote input, the remote will now be controlling both units as one. So now that we have the two units linked together, we have to decide what to do about our inputs and outputs. You'll notice that all the inputs and outputs are DB25 connectors, so that's going to mean you need some kind of DB25 snake. The DB25 configuration goes like this. 1 is left, 2 is right, 3 is left rear, 4 is right rear, 5 is center, and 6 is LFE. 7 and 8 are totally unused. So my first input is going to be the output of my interface, which is going to carry my 5.1 signal. Since the output of my interface is a DB25, I'll just need a regular DB25 snake. If your interface has something different, plan accordingly. For my second input, I'm going to use the output of my 2-bus LT. That means I'm going to need a female XLR to DB25 snake. Since it's a stereo device, I only have to use XLRs 1 and 2 to plug into my 2-bus. If you have any other inputs, plug them in however you'd like. So now we can plug in our speakers. The SR allows for up to 2 sets of 5.1 speakers, plus a stereo speaker set and a mono or stereo sub. Outputs 1 and 2, which on the unit are labeled as main speaker outs and alt 1 speaker outs, are your 5.1 speaker sets. The configuration is the same as the input, and it looks like this. 1 is left, 2 is right, 3 is left rear, 4 is right rear, 5 is center, and 6 is LFE. 7 and 8 are totally unused. If you'd like to plug stereo speakers into either of those outputs, just use lines 1 and 2. Output 3, which is labeled as alt 2 speaker and sub outs, is going to carry the outputs for your stereo speaker set and your mono or stereo sub. The configuration looks like this. 1 is left, 2 is right, 6 is your mono sub output, and 7 and 8 are your stereo sub outputs. The SR does a really clever trick when it comes to subwoofers. Let's say you've only got one sub, but when you're listening to 5.1 you need it to act as an LFE, and when you're listening to stereo you need it to act as a regular sub. Well, if you plug it into the sub output of SR output 3, it will be treated as an LFE when you're listening to a 5.1 input, and it will be treated as a regular full range sub when you're listening to a stereo input. The way the SR does this is by automatically sending the LFE signal to the sub output in addition to sending it to the LFE output. So my first set of speakers is going to be my 5.1 set. For that I'll need a DB25 to male XLR snake. If your speakers have a different kind of input, you'll need a snake with a different kind of connector on the other end. I'm only going to use lines 1 through 5 of this snake because line 6 is my LFE connection, and I'm going to use the LFE sub trick that I just told you about. My second set of speakers is just going to be a regular stereo set, so I'm only going to need to use lines 1 and 2 of this snake. For my third output, I'm going to have my stereo speakers and my stereo sub. So lines 1 and 2 are going to feed my speakers, and lines 7 and 8 are going to feed my sub. If you have a mono sub, you can use line 6. Let's check out the remote. The first thing you might want to do is do a soft reset of the remote. Sometimes when you power up your studio, if the ST comes on before the SR, the remote won't see the SR. Doing a soft reset fixes this. Start by going into Setup by holding down the Setup button until it turns solid, and then hit the PPI button. This does a soft reset of the remote firmware, but because it's a soft reset, it also saves all your previous settings. The next thing we'll want to do is program our inputs. We have to tell the remote which of our inputs are 5.1. So start by going into setup mode, selecting your input, and hitting the 5.1 button. In my case, input 1 is my only 5.1 input, but if you have additional ones, just select that input and hit 5.1. When you're all finished, exit setup mode by holding down the setup button, and the remote will remember your settings. If you want to learn more about the remote, click here to view a video about it. So that covers all the basics of how to connect an STSR system. Hook everything up and go make some music.